They said just let them know 2 minutes ago before you want to start so that they'll start the live streaming on YouTube then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We are live now. You can start the session.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining for today's webinar. As we all know that 4th of September is observed every year as World Sexual Health Day to raise awareness, promote education, and advocate for sexual health and rights. The theme for this year is consent. This World Sexual Health Day, let's talk about the elephant in the room, taboo talk, our bodies, our choice. Consent is a cornerstone of respectful and fulfilling relationships. And as part of a commitment to creating a safe and informed community, we are hosting a dynamic webinar to explore the many dimensions of consent. Today, we'll develop into topics such as defining consent, ethical and legal aspects, effective communication, consent in various contexts such as digital age consideration, bystander intervention, survivors' trauma and recovery. Thank you for joining us for an engaging session led by experts in the field, Dr. Manika Kamthan and Ms. Akriti Chaudhary. Let me introduce you to our special guest, Dr. Manika Kamthan. Manika Kamthan ma'am is a lawyer by training and worked with Symbiosis Law School, Pune. She holds MPhil and PhD from the Center for the Study of Law and Governance, JNA. She also holds a postgraduate degree in law and PG diploma in women's studies from AMU. She has several national and international publications to her credit. She writes regularly on interjections of law, gender, and disasters. She has completed research project on gender and disasters funded by Indian Council for Social Science Research, Government of India, and was also a part of Erasmus project on climate change and law at SLS Pune. Her interest areas include gender, disaster and social vulnerabilities, politics of identity, constitutional law, and environment studies. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, we would like you to give us some few lines and few words. Ma'am, you're not audible. Manika ma'am? I think there's some network issues. Ma'am, you're not audible. No, ma'am, you're not audible. When ma'am gets her network issue sorted, we'll move on to another guest speaker, Ms. Akriti Chaudhary. She is a counseling psychologist practicing for 3 years. She is also trained in habitat coaching, rational emotive behavior therapy, and narrative therapy for victims of trauma and abuse. She has help young adults deal with a variety of concerns, including but not limited to anxiety, depression, grief, trauma, sexuality, self-esteem, body image, as well as interpersonal relationships. Outside of sessions, she is a reader, content creator, and a coffee lover who loves interacting with young minds and discussing latest shows, movies. Thank you, Akriti, for coming for today's webinar. We would love it if you share some words of affirmation.
Hi, Khushbu. Thank you for that introduction. And I think it's genuinely my honor to be here and talk about sexual health and consent, which is extremely, extremely important, especially for the age group that we see here on college campuses every day. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. Thank you for having me.
Am I audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
So my video, I think I'm not able to open because it says because the host has stopped it. I'm very sorry for the inconvenience. There was some software issue. So yeah, we can start now.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we would like if you share some words of affirmation with the audience today, and then we can begin with the discussion.
Yeah, so I believe that any relationship, let alone be romantic or any other kind of relationship, and in fact, every kind of relationship should have the content of consent. As a matter of fact, for example, if you take even employer and employee, there also consent matters a lot. For example, that what you want, what can be entrusted to the employer or to the employee. Consent is something which should be paramount in any kind of relationship, let alone be between children and parents. But then when it comes to romantic relationships and when it comes to sexual relationship, consent all takes an altogether different form altogether. Why so? Because, for example, in other kinds of relationship, they might be hereditary, they might be familial, or they might be professional. But when it comes to sexual relationships, uh, there's a great component of consent there, and also because consent is something which is a combination of consent, capacity, and choice. So choice is something which is paramount when it comes to sexual relationships. That the person or both the parties should always have a choice to agree to few things, to not agree to few things, and to have boundaries also. For example, today we all know that there are different stages of any relationship. That it might start with organically with a kind of attraction, which then can take to another level. There are, for example, we all of us talk about first base, second base, third base, home base. So these are several things which because our sex education system is in doldrums. As a matter of fact, most of the people don't know about it. Most of the people don't know or don't have any idea about something called date rape or things like this, wherein because of the absence of consent, any sexual relationship will amount to rape. So I think it's a fantastic initiative taken by SCEW, and all kudos to the leadership at SCEW and at SIU, that they are holding such an important discussion on such a pivotal and very important topic, as a matter of fact, which not many people are, even today they are not talking about it. Even today they are withholding themselves from talking about it. And the whole idea of communication, the whole idea of saying what you feel, is something which I think we will be able to talk about it in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. As ma'am said, it's indeed a very important topic. As we all know that talking about sex and sexual activity is taboo and not many people speak openly about it. If the topic of sex is not spoken so openly about it, let alone asking for a consent. So today's topic is on consent, and I would like Manika ma'am to define what consent would be in aspects of law and in general, what consent actually means with regards to sexual activity.
So when we are talking about, thank you for the question, Khushbu. When we're talking about consent in a very generic sense, consent can be an amalgam of three factors. One is choice, the other is capacity, and the third is freedom. That the person is having the choice to say yes or no. There is a capacity. So, for example, I'll come to the legal aspect of it, that there is capacity, that the person is sane, the person is major, the person is not under any kind of intoxication, undue influence, coercion. So that all amounts to the capacity to make a choice. And then the freedom to make that particular, the person is having capacity as well as choice, but is not having the freedom to do so. And that it is the freedom component which in fact has triggered the whole discussion and debate around the phenomena of marital rape, that whether marriage amounts to the waiver of your rights, the waiver of the right to freedom. So consent in a generic sense means this amalgamation of these three components, that is choice, capacity, and freedom. When it comes to law, the consent majorly is defined under, if it come under the contract law, and in the legal sense also, consent should be free. So there is consent, and then there is free consent. So free consent is something which is free from undue influence, which is free from coercion, which is free from any kind of pressure, intoxication, fraud. For example, undue influence, for example, when we talk about Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act, many a times it is seen that there is a kind of undue influence of the seniors, wherein it is two models of sexual harassment, that is quid pro quo and quid pro quo and hostile work environment. So it is seen, and there are researches which say that because of the undue influence of the people in senior positions, people might be forced into sexual relationships. There is the whole idea of that the consent which is given under intoxication, involuntary intoxication, is not free. Then there is coercion, that on gunpoint or those kind of things, that where you are in fear of your death, of your life and property. So that kind of coercion. And then there is fraud. And interestingly, the Supreme Court of India in several decisions has again and again upheld that any sexual relationship on the false promise of marriage amounts to rape. So that is also that it amounts to fraud kind of thing. So legally, if under any of these factors, if the consent is given to any sexual relationship, the consent will not be regarded as free. So a consent to be legally regarded as free should be free from undue influence, should be free from coercion, should be free from any kind of intoxication. The person should be sane, medically as well as legally, and it should not be under any kind of misconception of fact also, that it amounts to fraud. So that is what do we mean by free consent in sexual relationships.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So free will and freedom to do without any coercion is consent. And Akriti, do you want to add some psychological perspective to what ma'am has said?
I think ma'am has extensively covered consent in all, aspects for sure. And I definitely agree with the free consent, because what stuck to me was, the ability to have the space and freedom also to give consent or to deny consent. I think that once you even ask for it, you don't wait for the response. And you're like, okay, I at least asked. So that space to also provide them, and that reminded me of what Viktor Frankl talked about, that we have the choice to choose our response between the stimulus and the response. So I think that's just something that definitely I agree with.
Yes. Does gender have any role in free will and freedom to choose? And does it only happen to females when it comes to coercion and forcefully incentivizing sex or sexual activity? Is it only men who coerce, or can we also see it in women?
See, there are no ground rules as such, but because of the societal position and because the society is fundamentally patriarchal in nature, men obviously have an upper hand when it comes to sexual relationships. Why so? Because it's seen as quite normal, and that men are going to have sexual desires. For example, we live in a society and we live in a country where the Supreme Court has all the Chief Justice, the ex-Chief Justice, said that marry the rapist. So it's the society is so that the sexual desires of men are quite taken as normal. That they are men, they are going to have it. But as far as women are concerned, it's a taboo. For example, sex before marriage or premarital sex is also a taboo. The whole concept around the whole idea of virginity. So traditionally, we have seen, and historically, we can say that women are at the receiving end, as well as I will say the LGBTQIA community also, which have a great or grave danger of sexual exploitation. And sadly, so that even today our laws are not gender neutral, because even LGBTQIA community are also exposed to or also vulnerable to sexual violence. But gender do have a role as far as the vulnerability to sexual violence is concerned, because of the whole construction of the society where men per se are in a superior position, where their sexual desires are not taboo. They are quite normalized by the society. They are quite normalized by the family also. But as far as women are concerned, it is not something which is not that it has not been normalized, if we can say, because if we are talking about ourselves or something, then we are a very niche population of this country. But if we try to generically, the sexual desires of women are not at all normalized in the South Asian societies at large, and if we are talking about India. So we can say that gender do have a role as far as the vulnerability to sexual relationships are concerned. Also, once women are into the psychological, I think accuracy can add to it, that women traditionally have, because of the, for example, marital rape or any other kind of sexual relationship, the onus for the success of the relationship is largely on women. Is largely on, for example, women end up losing their end up giving up their jobs or for the sake of marriage, or for the sake of marriage, or for the sake of the success of the marriage or continuation of the marriage. They do tolerate violence to an extent. For example, the whole refusal of the Delhi High Court to criminalize marital rape is saying that once you get married, there is a kind of the waiver of the idea of consent per se. So I would like to, as far as gender is concerned, I personally feel that gender has a great role as far as vulnerability is concerned, and largely it's the women who are exposed or who are vulnerable to sexual violence.
There's also a law which says, like, I don't know if it's right. Like, as far as I know, like, there's a law that says that like, if the partner is not providing in a marriage, then the person has the right for a divorce and break the marriage alliance. So, wouldn't that be as a method of being coercion, or like, if suppose I don't give my partner the consent to have sex with me, or maybe I'm asexual, like a minority where I don't feel like having sex. So, and I've been saying no to my partner again and again, and I love my partner, but on this ground, I'm having a divorce. So, how can we look at this dynamics? about an asexual person? And
Yeah. There are two aspects to your question. One is as far as law is concerned, we do have Section 9 in Hindu Marriage Act, and in fact, refusal to conjugal relationship is a ground. It's a ground. For example, impotency is also a ground for divorce. The whole idea of marriage per se needs to be, if we can question it. Uh, See, one thing is awareness. If you are aware about your sexuality, if you are aware about whatever it is, if you are aware about it, then I personally feel that marriage is something, uh, the basis of which is progeny, the basis of which is somewhere down the line is the conjugal relationship. And that's why law also recognizes it. That's why law also says that impotency is a ground for divorce. Let it be any personal law of any religion. Hindu Marriage Act Section 9 says that if the partner has withdrawn from the conjugal relationship without a reasonable cause, then a decree for restitution of conjugal rights can be issued against such partner, and the person can be forced into a conjugal relationship and what amounts to unreasonable cause is left open to interpretation by the judiciary. It is a known fact that judiciary also has a very imbalanced gender ratio as far as representation is concerned, and we can easily presume that judiciary also is in a way is a patriarchal institution. So we can obviously assume that what kind of decisions come in that case. The other aspect which you said is the asexual aspect of it. I personally feel that awareness is the key. So before taking such a big decision, it's a very big decision to get married to somebody. And marriage, first of all, we need to understand the institution or the nature of the institution of marriage. It is not just coming together of two people. Rather, the basis of it is reproduction. The basis of is progeny. The basis of which is that your next generation is not illegitimate. Illegitimacy and legitimacy are legal concepts. If you are aware about your sexuality, you should you should at least if you have as far as law is concerned, if you have in a way concealed your sexuality, and then you tell that okay, I'm asexual, that can lead you to problem, because impotency is a ground for divorce. So first of all, one should be very aware of whatever the sexual orientation is, and on the basis of that only the decision of marriage should be taken. Because even today, although we have decriminalized homosexuality, but gay marriages is still not a reality in India. Hopefully, they will. The Supreme Court is on it. So hopefully, we might come to that particular juncture or historical juncture where gay marriages are also legalized as all over the world. But as of now, they are not legalized in India. So even today, marriage, as far as India is concerned, it happens between two heterosexual people. The one is male, the other is female. And the decision of marriage should be based on the awareness about the sexual orientation. Thank you.
Akriti, do you have any points to share with the audience?
I think, of course, statistically, gender-based violence is against most women. That's just statistics for sure. But I also feel like, just adding to everything ma'am said, because I think it was bang on, is the fact that men, or they, like you said, they act as providers. So there's a lot of gender role that they have to provide in a relationship. So even for them, the concept of, oh, I can say no, or oh, do I have a say in this, is very alien, because they just have to. I mean, they have to live up to the standards, that because they have high testosterone levels, they have high sexual drive. So it's just so internalized, because it's so conditioned, that they end up not knowing, not being aware that they have the right to consent. So I think that's just something that I want to add in terms of gender. And I feel like it's of course, gender is just one aspect, but in terms of the power dynamics that play in the entire society, in terms of every layer, so whether it's every weaker section of society is favored against, and every powerful section of society, whether it's gender based, whether it's class based, caste based. I think the concept, as you considered weaker, the concept of consent becomes more alien to you. So that's just something I'd like to add.
Yeah, that's true. Like as women, since childhood, we are told that you have to cook for the husband, you have to provide for the husband, you have to take care of his needs, and even men sometimes they might think about marriage like as a sex contract. Like so, when it comes to law, even marriage is seen as something that it's a reproductive, like very legal in a very legalized manner, and to maintain the chaos of multiple relationships, marriage has been established so that it's a very systematic way of having sex. So, ma'am, do you have any points to share on the lines that I'm talking about? Marriage as a sex contract.
Yep, that's what I said, that the nature of marriage per se. For example, today we are talking about, we think that, okay, marriage is a kind of a lifelong commitment. But there are several school of thoughts also. For example, one school of thought believes that marriage something, or for example, monogamy is unnatural per se. As I said that marriage, the connotation of marriage, for example, the whole denial to legalize gay marriages is the whole idea that when you cannot reproduce naturally, why do you need to get married? When you cannot have children, what is the need? Then why is the need of marriage? Because until unless the marriage, so the whole idea, the notion that once you are married, then you are supposed to. For example, today this is a kind of an idea where people are discussing that whether they will have children or not, even before marriage, before they are getting married. So when they meet each other for the sake of marriage, or for then they are discussing this. I know people who discuss this thing that, okay, I don't want children. If you're okay with that, then we can go ahead. So that's a very latest, we can say, or that's a very recent trend which has come in, and that too in a very niche society, that too in a very niche part of the society. Even today, it is quite a kind of an unsaid thing that you are going to get married. If you are getting married as the so-called, age according to the society, young age, then the parents or the in-laws might take some time to ask you for having children. But if you are getting married at not so early age according to the society, then as soon as you are married, there is a kind of a pressure to have children, because reproduction do becomes medically, it becomes problematic after a certain age and so on. So I'll not say that marriage is a sex contract per se, but yes, the whole idea that the children are going to be born out of it, the children should be born out of wedlock, they should be legitimate, there should be more legitimate children in the society. That in fact makes it a kind of, as a kind of, because how the children are going to come? They are going to come out of sexual relationships only. They are going to come out of intercourse. So very indirectly, it becomes a kind of, it becomes a kind of a sexual contract. As a matter of fact, if you talk to any gynecologist or so infertility, for example, is increasing. All of us know, because of several hormonal disturbances and everything. Infertility is on the rise in the society. And in fact, when you go to a gynecologist, or when you see a doc, in fact, sexual relationships do become mechanical, because the whole idea is to conceive. So it also erodes the whole idea of pleasure out of sexual relationships. So marriage, that also, if we forget about the sexual contract, but marriage also do that also, that it takes out the whole concept of pleasure out of a sexual relationship, and it becomes very mechanical, because it is being done for conceiving. which obviously is a biological phenomena and a biological science.
Akriti, like when we talk about marriages, and not just marriages, but even live-in relationships or any couple that are living together, how would seeking and granting consent to contribute to more pleasurable activities and experience? What would be a psychologist's advice or suggestions for any couples? Like whether it be anyone from LGBTQA plus or any gender, age, and any type of relationship, what would be the advice of it?
So I think my advice would come from a little bit of sharing here. There are a lot of students that I see on campus and otherwise who want to share about their sexual experience, no matter the level of it, with a lot of enthusiasm, right? And eventually they end up in retrospect thinking that I'm not sure if I agreed to it. I probably ended up feeling great, but I'm not sure if this is what we agreed to do in the first place. Like I went to a party, things happened, and now I should be feeling great, but I don't somehow feel great about it. Like I told my friends, and they're all very happy for me, but somehow something feels weird within me. And that's when the question of, okay, how did things move ahead? Were you asked? Did you ask? Was the concept of this consent even there? And they're like, maybe not. And then they feel so disgusted and so ashamed that oh shit, we didn't realize. So I think one very, very important basic step we have to take is awareness. The concept that you have to know, what consent is and how do we talk about consent. And consent in no way means that, oh, you're being very rigid or you're withholding yourself or you're not interested, or that might make you unattractive. I think it just makes you more aware of the boundaries you have around yourself. So I give them this one idea that stretch out your arm and move in a circle, like move around. Treat this as your private space. And anybody who is to enter this circle of your private space has to ask for your permission. Because if they don't, they suddenly come too close, you might end up feeling a little taken aback. So always try and treat everyone in this circle as like, take permission, come in. At least I know that I let them in, right? So that's number one step that I always ask them to take. And in terms of how to communicate with it, communicate about it, I definitely, if you're seeing someone for the first time, make sure you're aware of what level of interest do you have in this. What is it that you're expecting out of this interaction? You need to be aware. And like ma'am talked about, the influence you're under is something that you need to be very, very mindful about. If it's under the influence of some substance, then make sure you're with someone, you're not going out there alone. I think these things you really have to be aware of. And one other aspect that I talk about is be very informed and be very specific, and be aware that if it's a not a yes, then it's definitely a no. So people don't have to say that yes, no, I'm not sure, or it's also a lot of non-verbal language that people don't give consent in. So it's not that, maybe she agreed to it because she didn't say no, or maybe she agreed to it because she didn't push me back. Um, these are things you have to be very, very mindful about. And hence the concept of consent is something which has to be taken away from any sort of intoxication and any sort of influence. So I think these are just things that I definitely do a lot of psychoeducation on in our session. And I, like ma'am said, I think these sort of discussions are very important for everyone to just be aware of what consent is and how they can practice it. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Akriti. That was quite informative and detailed. But again, now, like as psychologists, we can say that consent is for everyone. But when it comes to children, and because we can't, like, according to law, we consider children as like minors and they don't have say in consent. It's always the parents who would say yes or no to anything. And maybe there can also be child abuse, like maybe an elder, or maybe like a child abusing a younger child. And he might be thinking that, it's all right, it's okay, and like they might be feeling good within, and they do not know the concept of consent. So here, will the child's consent would be taken, or it would be parents' consent, or how would things go around in such scenarios?
So children per se are not legally, they can't give consent. And therefore the whole idea of people of majority of major age getting married. And not for something like sexual relationship, even the consent of parents is uh, is not good enough. The parents can give consent as far as their guardianship is concerned, or if they are partners in any kind of thing, or for example in will or something, then they can sign on their behalf, or for example adoption, for example. But as far as sexual relationships are concerned, children and nobody on their behalf can give consent to a sexual relationship because they are unfit. In fact, medically they are taken to be unfit for a sexual relationship, and that's the reason why under Section 375 IPC, rape, marriage with a child bride, any girl who is below 15 years of age, even though she might be a wife, amounts to rape. So children are medically as well as legally, they are taken to be unfit for a sexual relationship, and therefore neither children nor anybody on their behalf, let alone they might be their parents also, they cannot give consent on their behalf.
And what about consent, not in sexual activity, but just like kissing or cuddling and just being in a relationship? So, can two children be together, and how will consent work in those scenarios?
Consent, as far as, for example, as I talked about, that not many people know about first base, second base, third base, home base kind of thing.
Yes.
Although it's a society in which we are seeing the age of having first sexual encounter is decreasing day by day. Statistically, there are surveys like that. But as far as two children are concerned into a sexual relationship is concerned, even today it is not seen to be, it's not legal. But howsoever, if there is consent, for example, if nobody gets to know about it, or it's consensual, so the whole idea of introducing the concept of, or introducing the ingredient of awareness about consent in sexual education is very important.
Yes.
Anyways, all of us know that sex education is not something which is in a uh, great health as far as India is concerned. It is still not a very, we don't see that it is being given too much of importance as far as curriculum is concerned. And also, even where it is, we know that it is majorly about awareness about what a sexual intercourse is. Now, gradually, the whole awareness about sexual orientation component is also coming in, but the whole idea about consent is still missing from sex education. So, as far as two children are concerned, as your question is, I think the remedy can be that the whole idea of consent need to become a very essential component of sex education. But for that, the sex education also needs to be one of the mandatory components in school curriculum, which we still see is not a reality. Even if it is a reality, then it is a kind of a lip service which is being paid to it, where neither the students nor the teachers nor the trainers are very comfortable about it. I believe that things must have changed since our times. For example, in our school, the teacher talked about the reproduction of trees or reproduction of plants for 4 classes, but the reproduction of humans was done away in one hour, one class. I believe that things must have changed as of now today. But statistically, and there are states which don't have the component of sex education in their curriculum. So, that the sex education needs to become much more important. It should be an essential component, and in the curriculum for sex education, the awareness about consent should be the one of the essential components. Because statistically, the age at when people are having sexual encounters is decreasing day by day.
Yes.
There are several factors to it, exposure and whatsoever. Even medically, there are, for example, the age of puberty is decreasing, so there are hormonal reasons also. So the consent needs to become a part of the syllabus or the curriculum of sex education.
Yes. Because in
Right.
psychology, yeah, go on, Akriti, sorry.
Sorry, just adding to what ma'am said about sex education, I think even now, when I was in school, the concept of human reproduction was very quickly read through. And we didn't have sex education in my school, but for all the people that I heard had it in their schools, they had different rooms for like one for girls, they're meeting at this time, then one discussion for boys, they're meeting at this time, where they're specifically talking about unique aspects about women's sexual advances and developments, and same for men. But I think the concept of consent will only come when they're taught together, when they're trained together. So they're more sensitive and more aware of each other's needs and developments. So I just wanted to add that one point.
Yes, communication and education is very important. Will you, like Akriti, will you be able to talk about how we can initiate conversations about consent and how we can make it more generic rather than a taboo topic?
I think to begin with, communication in itself is like a very difficult area to work on for a lot of people, I think, around. So just having established certain rules, certain ground rules for having difficult conversations, having the space to have difficult conversations in committed relationships. So if I'm starting there, it's very, very important for you to be able to have difficult conversations in a relationship. If you're walking around on eggshells, that I might say something that might trigger my partner and vice versa, I think those are areas where talking about consent becomes extremely difficult for either of the partners. And maybe one person's feeling guilty also for not, for not being able to respect the other person's boundaries, but they're too afraid to ask about it. So I think in those cases, finding the space, finding certain ground rules to have those conversations. One strategy that I often talk to students about is that if it's a healthy, secure relationship and you are talking about it, let one person speak for 30 seconds or a minute, and you just have to listen. Put on a timer, put on a stopwatch, but all you have to do is listen and not give any feedback, not even non-verbal, where you're like, why are you talking? Not those sighs. And you're just listening to what the other partner is saying. And I think when you give that space, when you have that space for yourself, it becomes slightly easier to talk about these difficult things. And when we're talking about not so established committed relationships, consent is still very important. And in those areas, I try to draw personal boundaries around that person to let them know what is it that they're okay with. So working on your self-concept, working on your self-esteem, being aware of your own needs, and being able to draw those boundaries that beyond this point, I am not going to be a little comfortable. And I'm going to have a lot of consequences, a lot of emotional, psychological consequences post that. So I better draw a boundary here. If you're too afraid to do it, individually, all alone by yourself, because you feel like you might be judged, okay, ask a friend to be there for you, or ask any confidant to be there for you, just so that you're able to draw that boundary and you still don't feel so attacked, you still don't feel so alone, you don't feel that drawing that boundary isolated you out of a group. So make one person aware of it, make one person be like, just be there when I'm not so comfortable with someone so that I can take a step back. I think those are some of the strategies that I often talk to students about. But yes, first and foremost, the discussion around consent. And it's often talked about that if we teach people consent, they're going to sort of mock it, or they're going to joke about it that, hey, don't come to me. It's not, don't come close to me. I'm not allowing you to. I feel like, yeah, it can be misused and it can be joked around, but the point would be that they at least talk about it. So out of 10 people who might joke about it, at least one might actually use it in a serious situation when they need it. So the kind of impact then we have is really important that we start talking about it now.
Being vocal about consent is very important, and not seeing it as being very rigid, but it can be very attractive as well, because we can express ourselves in a relationship. It's very important to express. I mean, I can say that, I'm in a mood and I would love to do this to you, I would love to do that to you. Would you like that? What would you like? What would you not like? How do you want to go about things? And what benefits you, what helps you. That's very important. And maybe that can also reduce the performance anxiety. Men
Yeah.
have performance anxiety as well, that whether they're giving good. And even women, they might feel that they're not receiving enough. That's always because of the communication gap. And consent is that part that they're missing, that you're not vocal about it. They're not saying things, they're not expressing what they like and what they don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think
also
a lot of,
Yeah.
sorry, ma'am, go ahead.
No, please you go.
I think a lot of media, books, and shows and movies are talking about consent in a way that it's making it hotter, or honestly, in that situation that, oh, you're asking about me means you're concerned about me, and vice versa. If I'm asking before I proceed with any action, it means I respect you enough and I respect your boundaries enough to take your permission before entering them. So I think it's a few pieces of media I can think of that are trying to establish those boundaries.
That's
I
true.
also feel that somewhere down the line, it takes the route of reverse engineering, where women are always taught to, to fit in, you know, and that in fact extends to fitting in a relationship also, or fitting in a kind of the social milieu they are in today. So this whole fear of rejection, that if I don't agree to it, I might lose out on on somebody. I also feel the whole concept of dating is also very recent in India. That you are dating, that you are experimenting, uh, you are meeting people so as to get linked romantically to them, is not very old in India. It's very recent. Tinder, Bumble, all this is very recent, as a matter of fact, just not more than 10 years, in any of it. So that also, in fact, if we are talking about metros only, and in tier 2 cities and everything, even today, the whole idea of, the whole idea that if I'm getting linked to this particular person romantically, I will end up marrying the person. And the whole idea that I will end up marrying this person makes me somewhere down the line insecure, that I should not lose out on this person at any cost. That in fact create a very, very unreal pressure, where breakups, let alone divorce, but breakups are also not taken very casually. So Indian parents are, gradually they are warming up to their children getting linked romantically to somebody. But there also the idea is that, okay, now I know about this relationship, so you please get married to this person only, about whom you have been public. That also in fact creates a kind of unreal pressure, where women themselves think that, okay, आज नहीं तो कल तो शादी होनी ही है. So that particular concept, that I should not lose out, the person should not reject me just because I'm saying no. That is also, I think, that is also one of the factors.
Yes, ma'am. Also, there's something known as post-nut syndrome or something known as post-coital distress or dysphoria, where, for example, it means that I might have given consent and I like what I was doing, like the sexual activity I was enjoying, but later on, I'm filled with lots of guilt, sadness, and negative emotions. That's due to the society's pressure about sex being a taboo concept and we're not supposed to do it. And also, it can be not just with sexual activity, but also while watching pornography or doing something that makes us feel happy. So, it's like the post and after effect of what we've done. So, when we are giving consent, and then later on, can it be manipulated by saying that, oh, you manipulated me into doing all of these things and I didn't like it? And the blame goes on to the other person saying that you made me do this, I didn't like it. But at the time of the sexual activity, I was enjoying it. But after that, I'm filled with lots of guilt and sadness. That's because of the social cultural influence. So, how does consent play a role there? Because it's not the partner's fault there.
Yeah, so I think that's the most interesting aspect of consent in a sexual relationship, that it's a process.
Hmm.
That's what makes us distinguished from a consent in a contract, which is once. But in a sexual relationship, or in a sexual relationship, or in a romantic relationship, it's a process. I might be feeling something today, which I will not feel tomorrow. I'm not sure about. And there are several, as far as sex is concerned, there are so many things, and and we belong to the land of Kama Sutra. So, but I am not okay. I might be okay with it today, but I'm not okay with it tomorrow. And therefore, it is seen as a process that I might have said yes to it yesterday, but today I'm not saying yes to it. And if I'm saying no to it, then the other party should uh, understand it, should respect it, and should take it. It should not be like this, that you were okay with it yesterday, you should be okay with it uh, today also and tomorrow also. It's not once in a lifetime, or once. It's not a single feature, it's a process. And therefore the whole idea of, if you see, then that's why the whole idea of divorce also, that uh, that I we got married at that time. At that point of time, everything was nice, but we don't feel it anymore, or things are not going in the correct direction, and therefore we legally, the law says that you can part your ways. Similarly, even if there is no marriage, uh, the idea of yes or no still remains alive. It's a process, and it's not something which is given once.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, but with post-coital distress or dysphoria, is it that the sexual activity, the consent is given while doing the sexual activity, also they're enjoying and the consent is given, but the after effect, like it's not tomorrow, it's just after it exactly. The person starts saying that I'm not feeling good and feels guilty and starts blaming the other person that you manipulated me into it. But actually, nobody manipulated each other, everything was consensual, but then later, because the person is feeling so guilty because of socio-cultural influence, which the person is not aware of,
Mhm.
because the person is not aware that it's because the guilt is because of the society and the culture, the person
Mhm.
thinks that they have been forced into it and the partner is the culprit and they blame it on the partner. So in psychology we call it projection and defense mechanism. So it's like a lot of anxiety that's built up because of the sexual activity. And consent has been given, but then they just deny that no, I've been manipulated because of that the guilt feeling.
I think Akriti is a better suited person, because that's something, obviously, that becomes, in fact, if we go by the people who are denying to criminalize marital rape, is because of this particular reason only. Where does consent start and where does it end? And as far as crime is concerned, there is actus reus plus mens rea, whether husbands are having intention to rape their wives. So that's one of the biggest reason for not criminalizing marital rape is the procedural aspect of it, and the other what you are saying, that later you not feel okay, you feel sorry, you feel guilt or something like that. So I think I'm not very fit to answer this, but as far as my knowledge of psychology goes, I think no feeling can be no feeling can be rejected. As a matter of fact, if somebody is feeling some way, the other person needs to acknowledge it. But yes, it can become problematic if the person who is feeling certain way says that or make any kind of allegation. Then it becomes legal, then it becomes a legal problem, and wherein it's very difficult, as a matter of fact, legally, by evidences, by procedurally, it is very difficult. In fact, it's very difficult. That's the reason why there is more reporting of rape cases, but a very abysmal conviction, because of this whole reason that it is very difficult to prove when the consent is start and when does it stop. But even then, I think that Akriti is a better suited person to answer this.
I think we have to go down a lot to the basics because where does your definition of consent start from? Because there is a lot of guilt and shame associated with, oh, I'm consenting to any form of sexual activity with anyone, whether it's a committed relationship, whether it's someone you've just met. So the fact that I'm consenting to something or I would want to consent to something is also a narrative, a social norm you're fighting against, because women or men, I mean, we're all sort of brought up with these certain practices that we shouldn't be, sexually active at any point unless we're married, right? So the fact that where our definition of consent comes from, whether we're okay with accepting this about ourselves that we want to consent somewhere, is where the first fight begins. Where what is your idea of sexual activity with anyone, and where is it and when is it that you want to provide consent? Now, when we talk about the second level where we've given consent, yes, during the process, it's important that you're asked repeatedly, because you have to have that space to feel how you felt after the first move. And whether, again, fighting your own beliefs of whether I want to move ahead, whether I'm okay with consenting for something else as well. So that space has to be provided, whether it's happened previously or not, whether you're in a committed relationship or not. That consent has to be asked repeatedly. If you've had those difficult conversations a couple of times in a secure relationship, then of course, you can sort of move ahead a few steps because you're able to understand and read your person's verbal as well as non-verbal cues, right? But as long as it's one of the first few times you're having it, or you're not sure about your partner's needs and wants, consent is definitely something that needs to happen regularly during the process. Now, once it's happened, it happens in a lot of cases that they feel very weird about it. They really enjoyed it, but that's what they hate, that I enjoyed it. Or that's, now what am I going to do? Now I have to stick with this person because now how will I marry someone else? Or now how will I date someone else? And like you said, the guilt for anybody who's on the receiving end of it, that, oh, did I actually force you at any point of time? I think a lot of that has to do a lot with the narrative of sexual activity that's built around in society. So, who told you that you have to sort of be in charge of, be the moral police for your own self, and you can't have sexual activity before sex at all? It's you shouldn't. It's you need not to, but you really want to. It's that fight in their heads. And I think that's something that we have to understand in therapy. We have to explore, because, and I think that's something that a lot of people who are even victims of any sort of sexual abuse go through, that they feel extremely guilty for probably enjoying parts of that sexual experience. And then we really have to fight that this is a very physiological, biological phenomena. And what you're experiencing, the kind of guilt, the kind of shame, consequently, is a very, very socially constructed phenomena. So I think that has a lot to do with the idea of sexual activity that you have, and the narrative you're trying to fight.
There's like biology, which tells you that you're liking it. Then there's the social construct that tells you you shouldn't like it. And
Yeah.
then there's the social construct that tells you whom you should be having it with, how you should be having it, and so forth. So all of these,
Yeah.
like it's a very complex thing, like listen to biology or social construct. Because as a victim of sexual abuse, biologically you might be liking it, but you've not given consent. And whom it is coming from is also like the person is invading your boundaries. So that's another thing. And when you're in a relationship, you want it from someone, but you don't want to give consent, and your biology is saying that you want it. So there's a lot of conflicts between the society and the biology.
And hence, I feel like it's very important to ask for consent repeatedly, because in that moment, you could be very enthusiastic about the entire process. And hence, you need to be asked repeatedly before as well as during it. Because you could be very, very inclined to do it in the moment, any form of sexual activity. But you really need to check in with yourself at multiple times and make sure that the decision is informed. And once it's informed, then we deal with the emotional aspect of it later, because emotions are definitely going to happen. Emotion is any response to any change in the environment. So they're definitely coming. How you manage them, what you talk about them, has to do a lot with your beliefs about sexual activity in the first place.
How can survivors who are being violated, like the consent is being violated, heal and move forward? Because they have this thing that I liked it, but they don't understand the concept of consent. And they might think that, okay, I've liked it, maybe I wanted it, that's why it happened to me. And the question of why me, it never happens for other people, but why me? Maybe I wanted it. I liked it also at that time, but somewhere I feel no, I didn't like it as well. So how people of like who've been violated with the consent heal and move forward?
I think that's a very psychotherapeutic question, because it really involves a lot of, I think, dynamics at play. But you're absolutely right. For someone whose consent boundary has been violated, they end up feeling responsible for it a lot of times. That did I do anything to provoke it? Did I actually invite it in any way? Again, which has a lot to do with the society's narrative about sexual experience in the first place. That if you're dressing up a certain way, if you're laughing with someone, if you're enjoying with someone, you're inviting them, right? So there is a lot of it that rationally we know, yeah, we shouldn't follow. Like, you wouldn't ask for your best friend, you'll be like, of course you didn't want it. Just because you hung out with someone does not mean that they can violate your consent. But when it comes to me, it becomes very difficult to accept that part of me, that I didn't want it, I didn't consent to it, but still it happened. So that's something that I think we work a lot in therapy. We do the regular narrative check and regular thought challenging of what happened. And yeah, I think we just deal with the feelings of guilt a lot by challenging the narratives around it. But still, again, while that happens, consequently, we again draw boundaries. We again draw, where is it that we let someone in?
Yes. So till now we've spoken about verbal cues. Like verbally we can say about consent, but how non-verbal cues can be taken as a consent? Because sometimes when we see like it's a healthy relationship, verbal consent usually never works. Like the other partner automatically gets to know that the person wants it and likes it. The other person also knows that this person likes it, wants it, and it's happening without any verbal cue. So how does non-verbal cue like play a role in giving consent?
So once the conversation about consent goes around, once there's awareness that there is a concept called consent, I think we start becoming more aware of when we engage in sexual activities. Non-verbal cues could look like, just being a little resistant. It could look like taking a step back while the other person's moving forward. Your body is constantly giving you signs that this is not comfortable. So instead of feeling excited about it, instead of feeling very happy about it, you're feeling a little scared, you're feeling a little, and you feel it all in your gut. You might feel that your limbs feel a little paralyzed, that you're feeling motionless. You want to move, but you can't move. So, in addition to the fight or flight response, there could also be a freeze response, right? That people have to be aware of. So they end up feeling guilty that, I probably didn't say no, I didn't throw them away, or I didn't push it, I didn't restrain myself. It could be because they're in the freeze mode of their cycle. And hence, it's very, very important to understand that if it's not a yes, it is no. It is no in all of these signs. Even if it's a maybe, it's a no. So I think these are just some of the non-verbal signs that we have to look out for.
With fight and flight and freeze, there's also like something known as fawning, where the person would try to please the other person and would do everything for the other person because in the response of fear, because the person does not want to be attacked by in any ways. So the person becomes like it can be seen as a people pleaser, but not exactly. It's basically fawning. So how does a person, like such a person, when their response to any fearful situation is fawning, give consent and handle themselves?
I think then what ma'am talked about in the first answer itself, is it really free consent? Because it's happening under some sort of power influence. And then it is considered violation of consent. Because if there's anybody who's using their age, anybody who's using their position, anybody who's using any sort of superior resource that they have to get consent, it's not exactly consent in the first place.
So, are there any hotlines or helplines that can be helpful for people to go through who are seeking information around consent or maybe going through violation of consent?
Nationally, I'm not aware of helpline. I think usually it's. I think India is a place where, or rather South Asia. I don't think just South Asia. I think globally, uh, mental health is not given that much importance as much as it should be given, and therefore it's all of us know, and you people must be knowing it better, that it takes a lot of time and a lot of conviction to even reach out for help. And as far as consent in sexual relationships are concerned, I am not aware of any one particular helpline or so. But yes, with initiatives like these, or as far as because I have been associated with Symbiosis and I know the wonderful work SCEW do, I think at least the younger generation is in a way is doing away with this taboo of taking help, reaching out for help, reaching out to counselors, reaching out to psychiatrists and so on. But I'm not much aware about any one particular dedicated helpline.
What are the steps that, like, now that we're talking so much, some people like might not be understanding, when my consent is violated and when it is not violated? How would someone know that, like someone has violated my consent, and when should I be giving consent? How should I be giving consent? So what would be a takeaway for the audiences? Like, how would they get to know that, the consent is violated? And
I think the first and the foremost thing should be this whole awareness, that it is a thing, that that a relationship is organic in nature. It should There it is, as I said, that it's a process. It's not a deal. It's not a contract per se. And I am empowered enough to say no when I am not feeling like it. And the whole idea of fitting in, or this particular pressure to fit in, uh, because we deal with the students and we observe them day and night. We know the kind of pressure they have to fit in. To for example, the whole problem with, for example, substance abuse somewhere down the line. If that's not a very I'll not say that's a very good illustration, but yes, there is that we can draw a parallel, that there is this particular urge to fit in, and not realizing their own worth, the whole fear of rejection, that if I don't do this, I will not be seen as woke, I'm not seen as modern enough. My background will be questioned. Uh, from where I'm coming might be mocked upon. So I think these are the internal struggles, first of all, which should be encountered with the help of psychological help, if they are encountered. So, and I feel that a lot of reading about it can also help. That there is that the relationship is a process, and it should not be seen as the start and the end of any relationship. That until unless this is not there, a relationship is not going to start at all. I think that is also something which the younger generation is grappling with. That that if sexual sex is not the component of a relationship, it's not a relationship at all. That is something which I see, which was different as far as when, in at least I can say, as far as in my generation, uh, that it was not, it never used to be the start of it, which today generation, interestingly, they grapple with this particular factor, and that's what makes two parties on a different page. That one party might think, or is under an is believes that if sex is not a component, it's not a relationship at all. The other party might be into more of a Karan Johar kind of romance kind of thing. They might still be hooked to that idea. So that what makes two people on a different page. The other thing is that both parties feel that sex. If there's no sex, it's not a relationship at all. But there also, there should be this awareness that even that in that particular situationship also, if we may call it, because situationship, we need to talk about situationship also, as a matter of fact. Now it's really amazing that how things are changing and how fast they are changing. Even there, in a situationship also, there is always this particular idea of yes and no. So I think what we are doing right now, talking about it, I think this is the way out, I feel. Because first of all, this whole taboos need to be done away with. I think what we are doing is one of the solutions only.
Yes, talking about it and making people aware of it is a way out. And as
Making
you
people comfortable about it, that
yes,
this is happening, and this is not happening just with you, it is happening with many people. So there is nothing abnormal about it. There's no need for guilt or shame. It's happening all over the world. It's happening with the person next door, and it's totally normal. I think that's what talking do.
there's so much of peer pressure, and also about the celebrity worshipping, where they've seen celebrity couples and wanting to get into a relationship, idealizing someone's relationship. And also, we have a set of beliefs and attitudes that no relationship should have A, B, C, D checklist. We've got, I don't know, to be a perfect relationship, we need to have all of these criteria that needs to be fulfilled. And as students, they've entered the building relationships, having an intimate relationship becomes very important for them. And if they don't have, they feel like a loser, like they're not winning at anything. Kriti, can you highlight this more briefly?
Yeah, so I think, like ma'am pointed out, the rate at which situationships from relationship to seeing each other or just being in the dating phase to now being in situationships, the need for companionship has stayed, the need for love languages has stayed, but it was very quickly confused with the social pressure of being in sexual relationship. That trend is not something people are able to balance very well, and they get very easily confused with what is exactly that we want. So we're not sure of what we need, we're not sure of what we want, we just take what's given because that's just there out there in abundance, right? And hence it's very difficult for us to figure out, okay, where to draw the line for consent here or when to know it's violated, because it's just so much out there, right? So something that I read somewhere and I absolutely loved sharing is the concept of, how consent is as easy as prize. A, it's freely given. R, it's reversible. So if you're engaged in any sort of sexual activity, you can sort of take it back and be like, I don't want to go through with this. It's informed. You have to know what you're in for. You have to know how to go ahead. How does this process go ahead? You have to be informed, and you can't be like, and you shouldn't be like, I don't know what just happened to me, and now I need to process what happened to me. And E is for enthusiasm. You have to be aware that when you're in that situation, your biology is going to be at play, and but you still have to sort of. It can be reversible. It can be like, I know I want it, but I'm not sure if I'm ready for it. I don't know if I can deal with the consequences of it. So that awareness has to be there. And last S, it has to be very, very specific. If you don't specifically hear a yes, if you don't specifically hear I really want it in that moment, it is a no. So it's as simple as that. It's as simple as giving consent and violating it. So this is just something that I want to leave everyone with.
Thank you so much, Akriti. It has been a very informative session, knowing law and knowing the psychological perspective to consent. And to summarize the whole webinar, we have discussed what consent is, how gender plays a role, how society plays a role, and consent is applicable to any age group, but when we look at law, it's quite different. So psychology is very different. It applies to it, it's very inclusive, but law has a lot of rules and regulations with different kinds of marriages, different ages. So looking at it, we've got a very comprehensive outlook on consent. And if someone wants to, like from the audience, would want to ask any questions we might have missed, is free to ask any questions to the guest panelists. So we've got 10 minutes. So if anyone who would want to ask any questions, please feel free. I think we've covered most of the topics in there. So I don't think so there's anyone. Maybe oh yeah, we've got one question coming up.
It's a comment.
Oh, it's a comment. Does anyone have a question? Manika ma'am, if you have any information that we might not have covered, which we've not
I think
discussed.
all credit to you, Khushbu, that you have covered very extensively everything as a matter of fact. But I would like to I think I will close my closing statement will be that because of the years of patriarchy and because of we know the the position of women and the vulnerable position they are in, I think a lot of onus is on the male partners, wherein the whole idea that ladki ki na mein bhi haan hoti hai, it needs to be done away with. That a no should be taken as a no, as Akriti said, and should not be, and then there should not be any kind of activities to make it a yes or to presume it is a yes. In fact, I was reading somewhere that your physiological reactions should also not be taken as a yes. For example, erection, or for example, lubrication and all those kinds of things. That should not be, and legally also they will not be taken as consent, because those are physiological facts. So this whole idea that if somebody is saying no to me, that should not be taken as a kind of a defeat, or because that's the way men are brought up. So I think the larger onus is on the game needs to change, and now I think the gears need to shift, and men need to take some onus and responsibility and live up to it.
Yes, ma'am.
For very long, women have taken the stands and stood up for themselves. So why this onus is
Like
also
the Bollywood movies, like stalking, like ladki hasi to fasi, like stalking. The girl feels good. They want
I
it.
think that is changing. For example, a very recent movie I was watching, Satya Prem Ki Katha, which was on the whole concept of date rape. I think our films are also waking up to the change. So we should give them this much. I think the 80s, 90s, the things are changing.
Yes, ma'am.
But even today, if you go to tier 2 cities, it's the 90s music which is going on. So they are still hooked to that era. There is no denial from that. But I personally feel that why always women should have this particular burden and onus on themselves. Men should also take up some responsibility.
Thank
I
you,
think
ma'am.
just adding to that, ma'am, as long as men are even aware that something needs to be changed, we're okay. So I think when we give the onus to men, women take the responsibility that, yes, I'm going to be more communicative and I'm going to be more vocal about what I need. Because a lot of times women don't need, and so the men have to keep hitting and exploring and be like, you might like this, you might like this, which is where the lines of consent get very blurry. Like, you didn't like it earlier, but now you liked it. So when did I have to stop? So I think a lot, it falls on both partners, in the sense that both of them have to be more communicative. And as long as men just, a lot of people just acknowledge that I am not aware, but I would love to be, I think we'll be fine.
Yes. Not taking it as a personal attack.
Yes.
Like
Yes. Just being open to change. Yeah.
So I don't think so there are any questions. So it was wonderful having you, ma'am. And it was lovely to have conversations on such a taboo topic. Thank you, Akriti, for coming for this webinar and enlightening us on such a topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Khushbu. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for talking about it, making it a webinar topic. I think the more credit goes to you and your organization. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am, for all the knowledge. Thank you, Kushbu.
Have a good day, everyone. And we'll just end the webinar for today on a good note. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.